Hello, my name is Julien Ueda, and I am a senior undergraduate and coterminal master's student at Stanford University studying biology. Today, I will be discussing long-term bird population trends at the Jasper Ridge Biological Preserve. And this work was done with my advisor, Rodolfo Dirzo, and my mentor, Tyler McFadden. So thank you to both of them. First, I'd like to start off with a land acknowledgement. I must recognize that my institution of education and funding, Stanford University, sits on the ancestral lands of the Muwekma Ohlone tribe. This land has been and continues to be of great importance to the Ohlone people, and consistent with our values of community and diversity as an institution, we have the responsibility to acknowledge, honor, and make visible the university's relationship and all of our relationships to Native peoples. To continue, I provide a brief overview of my presentation. First, I'll discuss why we should care about birds and why they warrant study. Next, I'll discuss some of my analytical methods and the resulting population trends I was able to pull out of them. And then finally, I will discuss my upcoming study. So first, why birds? So I want to start off by saying that I am a lifelong birder, and I believe that birds have intrinsic value. They add beauty to our landscapes, and just as a part of our planet's biodiversity, I believe that they warrant conservation and attention. But I want to note that I am not the only person who believes this. A 2013 report by the US Fish and Wildlife Service found that 47 million birders across America attempt to identify and watch the birds even in their backyard. Many of these people buy bird feeders, bird seed, binoculars, spotting scopes, and all of this together contributes over $41 billion to the economy annually. Finally, in 2011, 665,000 new jobs were created, and due to the support that birding expenditures provide. In addition, birds provide a number of ecosystem services. So this is one example where the simple addition of a nesting box, shown here on the left, attracts western bluebirds, which can reduce pest populations on wineries by over 2.4 times in comparison to control plots. On the right-hand side, I want to discuss how birds can also act as bioindicators. They're often at the end or the middle of food chains and are reliant on the prey populations below them. So things like these insects. And that means that a decrease in plant or insect abundance could also cause a decrease in bird populations. So as a result, changes in bird abundance that we can much more easily measure could signal a larger issue for our ecosystem. Finally, birds are unique among many animals as they've been surveyed for a long time. The upper photo here is an early photo of the Christmas bird count, and this lower photo was taken nearly a century later. In addition, we also have larger databases like eBird where anyone can submit their bird sightings, including yourselves. In addition to all of this, the Jasper Ridge Bird transect dataset, which I will present on, is another one of these long-term datasets. So first, for those who have not been, the Jasper Ridge Biological Preserve was founded in 1973 on Stanford land. It has a variety of habitats, from riparian forests and lakes to grasslands. And finally, I want to note that the preserve has a long history of pre-Columbian settlement by the Muwekma Ohlone people, and the preserve supports a number of educational opportunities, like the Bio 105 docent class and the McFadden's Marrow program. So as you can see by this map, Jasper Ridge is surrounded by residential development and ranching land, but it also supports multiple bird survey datasets. So my mentor, Tyler McFadden, is analyzing the point count dataset shown by these many yellow dots, while I am analyzing the transect count shown by some of these colored shaded areas. So as said, the transect survey has a total of 6 sectors, A through F, and the methods are fairly simple. The observers walk a set path in each of these areas and then count the number of birds that are not only seen, but heard. And these surveys are done monthly. And that has resulted in a total of 31 years of study with a total of 2,025 transects that were done, a total of 189 species that have been identified, including all of these photos here that were taken by Peter Hart, and a total of 474 total birds were counted in these surveys. And with that, I want to take a moment to thank all of the transect count volunteers who have dedicated years of work towards this long-term data set. To all of you, I personally want to say thank you for letting me work on this project that you've spent so long doing. So I want to actually applaud all of you because I know many of you are in this crowd. So thank you so much. So from your years of dedication, I can ask questions like, what are the species population trends at Jasper Ridge? How do these trends compare to national and California trends? And then I can also ask how the populations of different groups of species are changing at Jasper Ridge. So some of these possible groups might be taxonomic groups, families, by diet, different nesting behaviors, actual behavior, or by preferred habitat. So to answer these questions, first I need to answer, is the abundance of a particular species in each survey changing over time? So in this graph, each dot represents the number of California scrub jays that are found in an individual survey. Ultimately, I want to create some kind of trend line or a model to determine how much the population has changed. So in this model, I have to account for variation in how each of the transects were conducted. So this could be something like, which of the 6 sectors that I mentioned was the transect conducted in? Because at least for the California scrub jay, a lot more were found in sector E, which is a grassland area, than in all of the other ones. So I need my model to account for that with an added smoother. So other sources of variation would be differences in observer or things like seasonality. So after I account for all of these different variations, and I can add this to my model, and then I can turn all of these red dots into these blue dots that show a much clearer trend and account for all of this variation. And then from these blue dots, I can then get an average trend line by averaging them. And then from that, I can determine roughly the percent change of abundance for California scrub jays or any other species since the beginning of the surveys. So that brings me to my results. So of the 189 species that were recorded at Jasper Ridge, I found that 66 species had enough sightings to accurately model their population. And then of that, 26 species actually had statistically significant increases or decreases in abundance. So this is a graph of all of the trends in species abundance. So each dot represents the percent change in abundance since the start of the surveys for each individual species. So you can see that some species are increasing up here, and then other species are decreasing. But then also a fair number of species are not changing. So that's actually because their populations might be stable, or we might actually need to continue to gather data on them. So of the 26 species that showed significant trends, unfortunately, the majority of them are decreasing. But there are some exceptions and some quite notable ones as well. House wrens, those little puffballs you find in your backyard, are increasing quite substantially, along with American crows and the wild turkey, which exploded and established itself at Jasper Ridge in 2014. On the flip side of all of that, there are species that have almost disappeared from Jasper Ridge. So that might be the northern mockingbird, that songster that makes 12 different songs outside your window, or the olive-sided flycatcher. So with that, I wanted to compare these trends I found at Jasper Ridge to national and California trends. And I did this using a larger data set, the North American Breeding Bird Survey. It contains about 4,000 survey points across North America. It was established in 1966, so it's very long term. And each route was surveyed annually. So of the 26 species that I found trends for, 10 of them actually showed differences from nationwide or state trends. And I'm going to spend some time to focus on some of them, like the California quail, our state bird, and just an adorable little puffball. But unfortunately, it is decreasing at Jasper Ridge by about 40%. However, it is increasing in California and nationwide quite substantially. So I hypothesize that this difference is due to historical hunting practices. So generally, game birds are rebounding from hunting pressure nationally, except Jasper Ridge is enclosed by residential development, and there's been little hunting around Jasper Ridge for a long time. So I theorize, especially because California quail populations at Jasper Ridge decreased during our mega drought, that we could actually be seeing the effects of drought on California quail populations, possibly decreasing the amount of food that they are able to access. So next, I'll focus on the chestnut-backed chickadee, a common backyard bird that attends feeders regularly. It is increasing by about 24% at Jasper Ridge. But in California and across its whole range along the West Coast, it is decreasing substantially. So this is, I believe, I hypothesize that this is because of decreased habitat and nesting opportunities across its whole range. But Jasper Ridge remains quite a suitable habitat. So I believe this highlights the value of Jasper Ridge as a refuge in largely urban landscapes like Silicon Valley. Next, I want to talk about the American kestrel, a ferocious predatory bird that you can literally hold like an ice cream cone in your hand. So it's decreasing quite substantially, not only at Jasper Ridge, but in California and nationwide. So this is because land clearing for agricultural practices removes a lot of old trees where woodpeckers have created cavities, which American kestrels then use to build their nests. Also, American kestrels they actually eat insects. So pesticides from agriculture reduces their main food source. And then finally, I want to note the value of using multiple survey methods at Jasper Ridge. So the point count might have some analytical advantages, but the transect count better detects birds like raptors or ducks or predatory birds like the American kestrel. So next, I moved to how are populations of different groups of species changing at Jasper Ridge, and what might be the possible causes of that. So first I looked at different bird families like woodpeckers, ducks, jays, herons, and unfortunately, herons and egrets, like this great blue heron in the bottom right-hand corner, are decreasing quite substantially. And I believe that this is largely due to the continued sedimentation of the Searsville Reservoir, which is reducing their marsh habitat. So I also looked at things like what are birds' preferred diets, and different omnivores, especially, were on the decline. So things like this California scrub jay and the northern mockingbird were decreasing quite a lot at Jasper Ridge. I also looked at different nesting habitats, whether they like to nest in old tree holes or make their nests in trees using sticks, or whether they just lay their eggs on the ground. And I found that birds that make their nests in shrub habitats are decreasing quite a lot. And this is important because a lot of these birds are actually Western native birds to California. And this could possibly be the result of a conversion of both shrub and chaparral habitat to residential and commercial areas along the California coast. I also looked at different behaviors and found that stalking birds like those herons and egrets are decreasing, along with ground foraging birds like the characteristic mourning dove or the California thrasher, which is almost range restricted to California. Finally, I looked at the preferred habitat of different bird species. And as you can see, birds that prefer urban areas are decreasing a lot at Jasper Ridge. So this is something like the European starling or the northern mockingbird, which I've mentioned. Except the northern mockingbird is actually not decreasing nationally or in California. So that makes me hypothesize that maybe northern mockingbirds aren't dying at Jasper Ridge, but they're just moving to urban areas, which brings me to my next study, studying urbanization. So Robert Blair was a PhD candidate in the 90s, and he surveyed natural areas like Jasper Ridge, the Dish, and even urban areas as far as University Avenue to determine the effect of urbanization on different bird communities. And then I plan to resurvey these sites to determine how has urbanization affected some of the species trends that I've shown before. So I plan to do these surveys in the spring and summer, funded by the Vice Provost for Undergraduate Education. And currently I am testing equipment and marking points with stakes. And with all of that, I'd like to acknowledge many people who've made this study possible. My advisor, Rodolfo Dirzo, my graduate student mentor, Tyler McFadden, for meeting with me weekly, Trevor Hebert, and the many transect volunteers who have made this study possible, the Stanford Woods Institute for funding me last summer, and the Vice Provost for Undergraduate Education funding me this summer. People like Julien for providing bird banding opportunities, and Peter Hart for a lot of bird photos included in this presentation. Finally, thank you so much to all of you for listening.